This is this young man, I think he's 12. He's got some pretty sharp central incisors, but it only took him 3 weeks to gnaw that divot into that device. Some people will split them in half. This is a different device.
Ask Jim how long.
Oh yeah, you can fill the divot. And they'll grind it back, but the rate of depth that they take seems to take longer and longer to reach that divot. Using posterior composite is a good idea. That has a little more strength to it. But if they continue to do so over time, pretty soon, filling the divot doesn't do it anymore. Then you all make an opposing slider. It's sort of like if you take a butter knife, you know, and you press down and move, you don't get much of a divot, but a steak knife sure will. Sometimes maybe I should just take a Whitestone and take the sharpness off those opposing centrals, because they've got nice blades they're using to scrape into that. This is two incisal guidance devices that I took off the discluding the anterior portion. This guy was a monster clencher, so this vertical dimension, I was already comfortable with opening it that far, but he squeezed so hard he was splitting devices. So now I'm opposing two of them. And so when he protrudes, though, I still want to reduce vertical. Here he is in protrusion, so I need to take this thing and knock it down and round this up a little bit. And there I've done that. Here's this daytime device that Barry already talked about. Don't let them wear a daytime device when they take a nap, just because it's the day. They can't. It's their sleeping device and their waking device. And this is this was originally called in San Diego, where I was a general dentist from 1985 to 1993, 94 here in town. That was the Boyd discluder. We called this the BD, the Boyd discluder. And so at some point, when I was in Michigan and we were developing the protocol for migraine, and someone on a license a patent said, "We're going to call it the Boyd discluder." No, you can't do that. So we'll talk later on what the NTI is indicating and what it means. This guy can occlude all of his teeth together, but if he makes a little bit of a shift, his teeth do that, and he's got this tooth touching in the back, where the evil palatal cusp of the upper second molar hits the distal buccal cusp of the lower second. They always seem to hang out together. And I just easily reduce. I have no hesitation on reducing that. I don't need to mount articulators. Barry showed this yesterday. This is a Keller Lab employee, by the way, who was at my lecture and decided, okay, he'll have an NTI Plus made for himself because he had it fit all the symptoms. So we went back to their lab, and lab guys aren't dopes. They can make it there without a doctor taking an impression. So here he is originally, and then a year later, 2 years later, he had this open bite. Didn't have headaches anymore, but he had this open bite. Yeah, Boyd was wrong, man. My teeth super erupted. And so they still had the models laying around and showed the guy. And he went, oh, yeah, okay. So what is it that happens there? Here's an extreme potential. This person's been clenching in their maximal intercostal MIP for a long time. They're not going anywhere. They're right there. Sort of like the person who's been in a sling for 6 months. When you take that thing out, they cannot extend their arm because this bicep's not long enough. You need physical therapy to stretch out that muscle. If you've been squeezing there for a long, long time, and the only place that condyle goes is forward when this gets short, when this contracts, this is its rested length. Its normal, non-contracted length is right here. If you place an NTI device and allow this elevator to bring this condyle more up and forward, it's got to be with this lateral pterygoid's permission. It's not a tensed muscle that is relaxing. What if it's a muscle at its normal length? It's got to stretch and get longer. Sometimes I wonder, because this takes weeks and months, is this condyle being elevated a bit during the clenching on this NTI, and that lateral pterygoid's response is to stretch and remodel, stretch and remodel. And so sometimes with this NTI device in, those back teeth are getting closer and closer. But the arch is still the same. It's like the whole thing is moving like this. I tell them we may be revealing an optimal position of your jaw that you're not in now. And once you reveal optimal position, You have to convince this lateral pterygoid and a muscle that does not exist to elevate that chin to go back to the pathologic orientation. You can't convince it to do so. The best way to predict who's in this 5% potential category, when they are in their original clenched position, there's very minimal incisal overlap. If this anterior maxilla was a little bit rotated down and those teeth were a little bit longer, doesn't matter where that condyle goes, you will not see an anterior open bite. So to me, an open bite, its potential is a function of the degree of incisal overlap at the beginning. If they've got a 1 millimeter incisal overlap, and that she's 24 years old and recently out of orthodontics and have bad migraines, we're having a talk. In the presence of success, I always lead with that. We might reveal that your jaw has been wrestled to the ground and being held right here. And I'm going to release the beast, and it might go to where it wants to go. You'll feel better in the presence of success. If this happens, your front teeth might not touch anymore. We have to start ortho over again. And they look at me like, oh my gosh. Or they'll look at me like, that's it? That's if I feel better. You said if I feel better. That's like, yeah. So you ever been to the oral surgeon and signed the consent form to get your wisdom teeth out? It says, in the event of death, da-da-da-da-da. This is the worst that could happen to them.
But even if it does happen, if the patient is okay to live with an anterior open bite, they don't have to.
No, because they won't have this posterior occluding at night anymore because they'll have their NTI device. And you can't pry it out of their hands. They won't surrender it. The reason why you have a 2-week recall and a 1-month recall, at 2 weeks they're feeling better. At 1 month, their teeth hit differently when they wake up. Say, okay, why don't you stop wearing it? And they go, no, I think I want to keep going for a little while. I say, well, pretty soon, if you can't bite some of your front teeth, let's get back together again. This happens pretty rarely. And you already know it's when they have minimal incisal overlap. I'll get your question, if they have minimal incisal overlap, or at least, let's do this, they have considerable incisal overlap and this thing happens because the condyle goes up and back, so this goes this way and this way, their degree of overjet increases also, but they can still protrude in incisal contact when they started out with considerable overlap to begin with.
Absolutely.
That person technically also has an anterior open bite compared to when they started. Now they're here.
But not functionally.
We can see up in there.
Right.
They don't care because they have the 3 things of occlusal therapy that I think patients really want. They don't want canine rise. They don't want incisal guidance. They don't want immediately posterior disclusion upon. They don't want that. You know what they want to do? They want to chew stuff, bite stuff, and feel good.
Yeah, but stop.
And that's her husband's decision. She looks good. Melissa looks great. They like to chew food. They like to wake up feeling better. And some of them like to bite stuff with their front teeth. That's the last thing. If they've got an open bite, there's ways to deal with that. And so if they've got a minimal anterior open bite, I'll start reducing these teeth in their protrusion attempt because they want to incise stuff. That's one of the 3 things. If this moves forward, I think that's the next slide. When they move forward, they are separated here. That's what bugs them if it's going to bug them. And I'll reduce these molars as best I can in the protruded attempt at incising because they want to incise stuff, chew stuff, and feel good. They can chew like nobody's business. Once I reduce this and they can touch, they're happy, they're done.